Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day we have and a beautiful opportunity to serve our God. Scripture reading this morning is going to come from Psalms chapter 127. Psalms 127, I'll be reading from the ESV. Starting at verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, the children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate.
Good morning, church. I'm glad to see everyone. I'm going to ask your grace and mercy on me this morning. I've got a terrible sinus infection today, so my head feels like it's this big. And then to make matters worse, just go to the restroom, and the soap dispensers, they get all clogged up, and then I shot soap at my pants, and it was awesome. So I'm having a good morning, y'all. So I was like, really? Of all the days to get soap on your pants. And you can't get that off with water because it's just going to soak up. So there's nothing you can do about it. So here we are, and it's a beautiful day. I love the attitude our brother back there has always, and just his positivity. Rhett always encourages me. He always encourages me, and I love the fact that he brings that attitude to our worship service always. Even Elliot and his song leading this morning, and the upbeat nature of everything. That's how we should feel when we come into the presence of God, church, as a unified body. We should feel so uplifted and upbeat and positive because we truly have something so unique here, and it is to be treasured. Before we get into our lesson this morning, want to announce for the elders on their behalf. This morning, as we go into the rest of our worship period, we're going to take communion here in a little bit, and then we'll have our offering. Just as a reminder for everyone, today, since it is the fifth Sunday, we are taking up a special contribution. And this special contribution today will be to help the efforts of the congregations in Amory, Mississippi through all of the damage they suffered from the storms and the tornadoes. So if you weren't aware of that as you prepared this morning, if you haven't already prepared, or even if you want to give a little more upon your preparation already, be mindful when we take up our offering today. That's what we will be doing, and that's what that money will go to today, is for the congregations in Amory. Also, if you're visiting with us, I'd like to say welcome. We're so glad you're with us, and you've come on the best day, because after we get done with worship today, we get to go have a meal together. So you are invited to stay and hang out with us. We'll go to the fellowship hall as soon as we're dismissed today, and you can share a meal with us, and we'd love to get to know you and hang out with you some. One more item here. For everyone that is making preparations this month coming into May, gearing up for summer, we have lots of things going on. You got Mother's Day, so everyone, there's your reminders for Mother's Day to go ahead and be making those preparations. But we also have our graduation banquet coming up on May the 21st. So the third Sunday in May the 21st, after the PM service, we'll have our graduation banquet. Liz Ann Webb is our lone senior. And so we invite you to come and join us for that evening service, and then for the banquet to be followed after. So if you're making preparations for cards and things like that, we have one senior, so make it easy on your wallet this year. But that's who we will be celebrating as that time comes. All right. Good deal. There we go. All right, we found it. Good deal. So I want to tell a story that we all know, right? We all know of this tragic event in April of, 1912. We all know the story of this RMS Titanic. This RMS Titanic is going to leave Southampton, and no, I'm not talking about the movie with Leo DiCaprio, right? They do display a lot of great things in that, but the true story of the RMS Titanic, going to leave Southampton, and it's going to make its trek to New York City, and this was no regular feat for a ship going from one country to another. This was going to be world shattering, like just earth-shattering, world-changing moment here, because we have finally have this vessel, this ship, that is going to change the cruising across the sea as we know it. There are so many preparations that have been made. There's so many things that have been done to make this different. And it's a very historic day. It's first class, right? This is a first class ship. This is the best of its kind. And even the designer himself, as tales will tell, as fables will go, I guess, because we weren't there. We don't really know. But from what we understand, that he even said that God himself could not sink that ship. I love some good irony, don't you? I don't think God did that, but hey, God's creation did that. But here we have 4 days into this journey, there's this world-changing event happening. We have people coming from Southampton to New York City, and then 4 days into this journey, the ship hits an iceberg. The ship hits an iceberg and panic ensues, and we all know why. It's because now the vessel is filling up with water from the bottom to the top. It did not withstand the contact, and now it is going to sink. There comes this realization there is nothing that can be done. There is nothing that we can do to save this vessel. We just have to save the people on it. There's a problem. We can't save everybody. We actually cannot save all the people on this ship because we didn't make the proper preparations. You see, what they come to see is as this event ensues and as it unfolds is that they have lifeboats on board, but there's not near enough to get everybody off the boat. There's people that accepted their fate, the third-class passengers that accept their fate, and they just await what is coming from them. There's panic. There's people fighting each other over who's going to get on the boats. Women and children are first. There are people trying to be selfish enough to get on there because we've got to save ourselves. People just lose their minds over what happens. But where was the real problem? It wasn't in how people panicked. It was in the preparations that led to the panic. You see, the ship's designer, the ship's captain, the ship's crew, when they were all putting this plan in place, they should have looked at all this and said, we're going to need more than that, because if something does happen, we need to be prepared. But what they had in their mind is nothing is going to happen. We don't really need it. It's just going to be an eyesore. It's going to take up a lot of space. It's going to cause more work. We don't really need all that because God himself couldn't sink this ship. Why do we need all the lifeboats? We need enough just to say that we have them. And then here is our problem. They never saw what truly was coming and never envisioned that it could happen to them. Church, our world is sinking, and it is sinking fast. We are watching all of this unfold around us, this tumultuous culture that continues to send us spiraling downward. And what are we doing to help the situation? Church, I can tell you right now, the best thing we can do is be making preparations. And not just for heaven, not just for ourselves to get for heaven, but we need to be making preparations for the people around us to help them get to heaven, specifically those that are in our home. We have this crazy world that's sinking, all these dangers ahead. And the one thing we need to understand, we talked about it in our teen class this morning, is that there is nothing we can do to avoid some of the dangers that lie around the corner. There's so many of us that have bought into this lie that the devil tells us is that's not going to happen to me. I don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to talk about it. And then when it happens, then we have a problem. Church, that's happened from generations. It's not just this generation. It's generations 2 and 3 in the past. There's so many of us, we don't want to talk about the hard subjects because we don't want to actually accept the fact that those things may become a reality. We don't need to talk about homosexuality. My kid's never going to deal with that until they do. And then you got a problem. We don't have to talk about teen pregnancy because my kid's not going to deal with that until they do. And then you have a problem. I don't have to talk about my marriage and work on it because an affair is off the table until one happens. And then you have a problem. You see, we avoid all of these hard things because that danger isn't really going to affect me. But church, we're not immune to the things that the devil has put in our world. That's why we are in the situation that we're in, is because the very first people that God created thought that they were good enough to not be deceived by the devil, and it didn't take him very long to prove them wrong. All he had to do was show them something that they wanted and trick them into thinking that God was jealous of them and didn't want them to have it, and God wasn't going to be mad about it. And then they had a problem. They weren't prepared. They were not prepared for what was coming. Church, this morning, that's what we need to talk about. We need to talk about making our preparations. I was doing a podcast a couple years ago, being interviewed on a podcast, I should say, and the facilitator of that podcast asked me a question, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I love my job. I've been in youth ministry now for 13 years, and I love every facet of it. Nowhere even near the top tier of the best guys out there. I just do the best with what I've been blessed with. But there are some guys out there that are really good at what they do. But they said, in your experience, in the 10 years that you've been in ministry, what is one of the things, the epidemics that we're facing as a culture, as a church, as families, when it comes to everything that we're dealing with, what do you see as the most important thing that we need to be addressing? And this is what I told them. We need to get back to focusing on our homes, because that's where everything is built, and that's where everything is going to make a difference, and it's going to change. We need to get back to focusing on the home, because that's, when we look at the world right now, church, I'm saddened. I'm saddened by the state that our country especially is in right now. And when I watch these videos of all of this terrible stuff that's happening, the one thing that I can't get out of my mind is that this could be totally different had those people been raised in a godly home. If they had been given the values and the belief systems and the principles that were founded in eternity with God Himself, we wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with. And some of those people may have been, and then those principles got distorted because some of those families didn't make the preparations for what was coming down the line, and they abandoned their faith. They abandoned their faith for what was right in front of them, and they had a problem. Now their families have a problem. And so that guy asked me, what do you think we need to be focusing on? We need to be focusing on our homes. We need active parents, church. And when I say active parents, I don't mean living. I don't mean functioning. I don't mean just being in the same room at the same time. When I talk about active parents, we need people that are purposeful and intentional about guiding our children through what is coming down the line in this world. Intentional about putting their belief systems in place and teaching them why that's important. Church, we need active parents. To me, I think it's just as bad an epidemic for a child not to have a father than to have a father that's in the home and does nothing. That's the same thing to me. And I actually think it's a little bit worse, because you do have a blessing and a moment right there that you're not taking advantage of. And it's not just active parents. Here's the next thing. We need active grandparents. We need active aunts and uncles. We need active friends and neighbors. We need active church members that are taking an intentional approach to the people around them. That is what is needed more than anything in the world, is being intentional and purposeful about what we're doing and not just doing it. Because I have a feeling there are times, myself included, we get caught up in this rat race, and what we're doing is just living and surviving and moving day to day and just trying to do the best we can, and we forget about being purposeful and intentional about what we're doing. We just find ourselves doing it and going through those motions. Matthew chapter 25. We talked about this in our men's study a couple of weeks ago. Matthew chapter 25, Jesus gives a parable. And when he tells this parable, he's talking about the parable of the talents, and he talks about these three people that have been given certain amounts of money. They've been given certain blessings that they are to be in charge of, that they are supposed to take care of in the event when he comes back to be able to give back to him. And so he gives one 5, he gives one 5, he gives one 2, and he gives another one 1. Here's the problem in that whole story that I see, is that there's one person, and Jesus addresses this. There's one person that does nothing with what they've been given. because they were afraid they were going to mess it up. Here's my news flash for everybody, and I needed to know this as a young parent. We get so afraid that we're going to mess our kids up. You're going to mess your kids up, all right? Let's be real. All of you that are adults that have been kids, you're like, ain't that the truth? Yeah, right? We're going to mess up. It is what it is, and it happens. But if we're being intentional and purposeful about what we're doing, those mistakes will fix themselves. We can't be afraid to do what we're supposed to do, to take those extra efforts, even if they're a little bit more scary, to take those extra efforts to try and do what God has blessed us with. Because here's the deal, in all of those things in Matthew chapter 25, they were stewards of what God had blessed them with. They were giving something that wasn't theirs, and they were supposed to take care of it until the master came back. Church, as we look around this room this morning, the friends that we have, the spouses that we have, the children that we have, the grandchildren that we have, the friends sitting next to us, all of these things are blessings that have been given by God for us to nurture and cherish and be stewards of until He returns. Period. My question is, what are we doing with those blessings? Are we being the stewards that God has called us to be in Matthew 25 and taking care and nurturing these things? Especially the hearts of those who are actually in our homes, our husbands and our wives and our children. Are we nurturing the hearts of those people? You see, when God was establishing His covenant with His people, this is where I want to go with you this morning. I want you to see the language that God uses in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Go there, Deuteronomy chapter 6. I want you to see the language that He uses here. As God continues to establish people, as He continues to establish homes, as He continues to establish His covenant from the beginning of time until current day right now, the common theme that we see is that the home, family, is extremely important to God. God takes great value and pride in how we are building and preparing our homes. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6, I want you to see this. The writer says, "Now this is the commandment, and the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son's son, by keeping all His statutes and His commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear, therefore, O Israel, be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may greatly multiply, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey." Verse 4, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." You know, when I read this passage here and I look at that, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then taking these things and not just permeating your own faith, your own walk with Christ, your own relationship with God with those things, but taking those things and putting them into the heart of your children, into your spouse, putting them in the heart of your grandchildren as they come along, into the people around you, so that the entire population of God's people will be focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is pursuing God's will and being with Him. That's what all of this was supposed to be about, and I love the language here. And He says, be careful to do them. Be careful to do these things. God has promised us something so wonderful. God has promised us something that is coming down the line, but we have to be careful with what He has given us and do the things that He has charged us with. So how do we make these preparations is my questions. When I asked this morning, are you prepared? Are you prepared? How do we make these preparations? How do we write these on our hearts and on our children's hearts? I love the language that he uses there. You shall teach them diligently to your children. My question to all of us in here today, in the rat race that we run right now, how much diligent teaching are we putting into the hearts of our children? How much time and effort are we putting into the diligent teaching of our children in our home every single day? I can tell you right now, I love the fact that we have our kids in this church building this morning. But bringing your kids to church is not enough. Taking them to Bible study on Wednesday night is not enough. Sending them to Vacation Bible School is not enough. Sending them on all of these youth trips is never going to be enough. If it was enough, God would have allowed it to be enough, and He would have put the charge on the church. But He put the charge in the hands of the families and those responsible for the hearts of these people. What kind of diligent teaching? When I read that word diligent, I don't mean sporadic. I don't see it as something that we do on occasion. I don't see it as something random if we have time. When I see something diligent, it's something that I do purposefully every single day. Are we putting the diligent nurturing of God's will and purpose in the hearts of the people in our home, with our spouses and with our kids? Are we being diligent about that? He says, be diligent to your children. You shall talk of these things when you sit in your house. My question is, when you sit and you have conversations, whether it's in your car, because look, we travel everywhere, all day, every day. Everybody's got practices. Everybody's got this and that. Do you talk about spiritual things with your spouses and your kids? Grandparents, do you talk about spiritual things with your spouses and your grandkids? Do you have conversations of depth as it pertains to the relationship that you have with God? Do your kids know, parents, my question, do your kids know how important God is to you by how you talk about Him in your daily life? That's an accusation against me too. Do your kids know how important God is because of the way you talk about Him to them? Not talk about Him to them in teaching, but just in reverencing how awesome God is and what He's done for you in your life. Do you talk that way to your kids and to your spouse about how good God is? Grandparents, do your grandkids know how important God is to you because of the way you talk about Him in your everyday life? Are we having those conversations? Is God at the front of our tongue and at the beginning of all of our conversations because He is the Creator and the Sustainer and the Lord of all? Do our families know that without a shadow of a doubt because we believe it and we talk about it? Is it something that is so rich and so deep in our homes that we think about it when we lay down? It's the last thing we think about when we lay down. It's the first thing we do when we wake up, is we thank God for who He is and what He's done. When we have a walk, I love this, is even as you walk by the way, are you teaching these things? Are you putting these things in the hearts of the people that you've been given stewardship of? Deuteronomy chapter 6 is rich, and it's not just for the children of Israel and the people of God right here. God wanted us to know something so important right here, is that if we're not taking advantage of the stewardship and the blessings He has put right in front of us to live among us every single day, then we're missing something. We're missing something. In Proverbs 22, we always read that passage, it's train up a child in the way he should go, and he will not depart from it. Church, let me go ahead and tell you something. I've told our parents this since I began youth ministry. Some people are not going to be poured into at all. Some kids are never going to be given a chance spiritually, and they're going to end up being spiritual leaders because somebody else did. Some of us are going to pour into them the best we possibly can, and they might still walk away. But that goes back to the parable of the talents. We can't be afraid of that moment and not do anything with it, because once they become adults and they leave our home, we have no control over that anymore. But that should not scare us and intimidate us and keep us from doing the things that we're supposed to do with our hearts while we have stewardship of it. Are we training them up in the way that they should go? Are we pouring into them the way that God asked us to? As I look at other parts of Scripture, and I look at the importance that God put on the home, I love this, is that when we go to 1 Timothy and we're looking at the description of what elders in the church should be like and the qualities they should require in order to lead the church, there is great emphasis put on the home. Because how in the world could a man lead a congregation of people if he's not leading his children? See, it starts in the home. It all starts in the home. And that's what we need to be thinking about. How in the world can somebody do that? And that took me to our idea of evangelism, is that we get so outwardly focused, and I think that's important, is we need to be evangelizing the world. Jesus told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel and bring them to Him and teach them about Him. And I think that's so important. But never let us forget the greatest blessing God has put right in front of us, and never get so focused on trying to fix the world that we forget to take advantage and focus on the stewardship before us. You know, Jesus actually asked a question. He said, what would it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What would it profit a man for him to gain the world and lose his own soul? Church, I'm going to ask you this. Parents, I'm going to ask you this right now, because the parents in here are the ones that still have children in the home. If you're so focused on fixing the world, and you can bring numerous souls to the church, and in that effort, you don't focus on your children, what did it profit you to bring all of these people to Jesus and lose your kids? So many of us are trying to fix everything out there that we're not fixing the things in here. I think we need to try and save every soul we can possibly save, but do not forget about the people right in front of you. They're not immune to it, and they need your help, and they need your guidance more than anybody else in the world, because if you're not going to give it to them, somebody else is. And I can promise you that. Somebody else is going to pour into them and give them the guidance that they need. You see, even our elders, and I appreciate this about our elders, our eldership, when I started here, actually gave me a priority tier. And they said, here's the things you need to focus on when you work here as a minister. And I appreciated it so much because I knew they had vision. And they said, your relationship with God comes first and foremost. If you don't have a good relationship with God, you can't do anything else to help anybody else. Your next thing is your marriage. You need to focus on your marriage, and you need to focus on your children. And then comes your ministry job. They understood the stewardship of the home was so extremely valuable and important. And they said, do not lose your marriage and your children because you're doing too much of this. You need to focus where God has put you as a steward to focus at. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6 right here, we see that. Talk about it. Let it be on your heart. Your relationship with God is the first most important thing. Your relationship with God is the most important thing. For everybody in the room this morning, you can't help people if you're not helping yourself. You have to be willing to look at your relationship with God and take a survey in your own mind and your heart saying, where do I stand with Him? And be working on those things. And then you need to look at your marriage. And that's not just parents, that's everybody in here. If you're a spouse of any sort, right? If you're a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, we're looking at the home. If you're a spouse, you still have stewardship in your home, and that is to nurture and cherish and steward the heart of the person next to you. Are we doing what God has asked us to do in that? And then church, this has been on my heart so long, I guess, just watching everything that's happening in this world. And then this past year, I thought it was so appropriate that our Lads to Leaders theme was let us rise up and build. And then we have this moment where we're focusing, and you've heard all the speeches, right? You heard all the speeches. We've done all the things, Lads to Leaders, that in the last year. And you've heard about this passage in Nehemiah where they all challenge themselves together collectively, and they say, let us rise up and build. Let us do this together. The one encouragement I want to give all of our parents in the room is that, yes, we're supposed to steward the hearts of our children the best that we possibly can. But you don't have to do that by yourself. God never intended for that to be a thing. That's why he gave us grandparents and aunts and uncles and the church. Let us rise up and build. Let us rise up and cherish and nurture the hearts of all of these people around us. Because let me tell you something, if you're struggling with your own faith, there's somebody in here. Even if your spouse, you and your spouse are struggling, there's another couple in this room that can help you with your marriage. There's another couple in this room or another person that can help you with your relationship with God. There's other people in this room that can help you with the raising of your children. That's why God gave us the church. And so what we look at this is not just about preparing our godly homes right here and doing what I have to do with the 4 people in my home, but making sure that I'm paying attention to the people in this room as well. How can I help you be a better Christian? How can I help you and encourage you to be a better dad? How can I help you be a better husband? How can I help you be better teenagers? Because y'all think we're dumb, but we were all teenagers too, right? We've been there, we've done that. We got all the t-shirts, let me just tell you, all right? We can help you, and that's what we're here to do. My question is that our focus? You see, there's so much going on, this rat race around us, and we're just like, we just got to get from this day to the next day and from that day to the next day, and we've got all this stuff around us, and all we're focusing on is all of the evil around us. Are we taking time to slow down and look at the people around us and seeing how can we help them? How can we help the church grow? Because I can tell you this, the church will not grow if our homes are not growing. It starts in our homes, and then the homes are going to permeate the church, and the church is going to help itself grow together with all of these different families, individual families, and then we're going to infiltrate the world. That's when we will fix the culture. That's when we will help eradicate some of this evil, is when we start working in our homes, and then the homes permeate the church, and then the church permeates the world. I think in some ways we've gotten it backwards. We're trying to fix the world, and then we'll take care of these other things later. No. Because that takes me back to the Titanic. Because if we're going to try and fix the world and then fix everything else first, by the time we're done fixing the world, the people in front of us are already out there, and we've forgotten to nurture them into what they were supposed to be before they went out there. And we didn't make the preparations in their hearts before they left. You see, that's what made the Titanic an even greater tragedy than it was. Had the ship just hit an iceberg and sank, and they had all the necessary equipment to save everybody, it would have just been like, yeah, that stinks. I hate that really massive, awesome ship hit an iceberg and it sank. That's not a really great thing, but hey, everybody was saved, and that's a really awesome thing. But what made it the tragedy that it was because the preparations weren't made ahead of time that allowed all of the death and all of the sadness that we see and make movies about today. All because somebody couldn't see what might happen and make preparations for that and be sure that if something does happen, we're prepared. That's my question for you as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, as people of the church, as spouses. Are you prepared? Are you making preparations? Are you looking at what you're doing? Are you looking at how you're living your life, at how you're talking about God, at how you're obeying God's will, at how you're teaching that and conveying that to everybody around you? Are you making preparations for yourself and other people? Are you prepared? Are you prepared to send your kids, parents, into this world? Because now is the time to be making those preparations. Because it is coming, and it is coming fast. And I never understood that, by the way. Y'all think we're dumb. I'm telling you, you think we're dumb. We tell you life only gets faster when you become an adult. That's not a joke. I don't know where the last 18 years of my life went. All right? And especially since we had kids, the last 7, right? And some of y'all are like, yeah, he's up there, 37 years old, talking about how fast life goes, right? But you know. And there are things that even you, as maybe grandparents, go back and you look at and it's like, I wish I would have done that differently. You know, for grandparents, if you look at something and you say, I wish I'd have done that differently, guess what? God has given you something else, another opportunity with your grandkids. as aunts, uncles, as people who help nurture lives of children. Maybe you don't have children. God has given you an opportunity with the people you have right here in front of you to nurture their hearts. Are you making those preparations in them and with them? Are you doing this with them? But the preparation, obviously, does start with you. And I guess that's my thing this morning is for all of us is we need to be preparing godly homes. We need to be raising our kids the way they need to be raised. We need to be treating our marriages with the sanctity and the respect and the love that they need to be treated with. We need to be taking care of the things God has put in our stead. But we can't do that. We can't do that if we ourselves aren't prepared and we have a relationship with God Himself. That's my question to all of us this morning, is are you prepared yourself to go to heaven? You need to be prepared to go to heaven. You need to prepare to stand eye to eye with your Creator. You can't get your family there if you're not already getting yourself there. And so my question for all of us, even you as teenagers, you talk about all the friends that you want to help, and you talk about all the people that you want to inspire with this Jesus thing. Are you prepared to see that through yourself? Are you in a state that's going to allow them to come to Jesus because you're already there? You see, before we start helping people, we have to help ourselves, and God wants to help us. Are you prepared? We talk about that so often, always, and we offer invitations every time that we're together. But one thing I think that gets lost on us is it's just kind of monotony, and it's just kind of habit, and it's just what we do. We just offer an invitation, and if you have a need, then you can come forward. But church, what we've done since the time the invitation was ever offered is that all preachers, all elders have always put this time before us for us to take a consideration of ourselves, to take that mental survey, that gut check moment as we sing those songs to say, who am I in the eyes of God? And am I prepared to do what He has charged me with? And so this morning as we offer the invitation, I don't want us to just sing the song. I don't want us to just go through the motions of offering the invitation. I want all of us individually to think about our relationship with God first. Who am I in the eyes of God, and where do I stand with Him? And then I want us to stand truly and think about us as parents and to say, who am I as a parent, and what am I doing with the blessing God has given me? Who am I as a spouse, and what am I doing with my marriage to glorify God today? What am I doing as a grandparent? What am I doing as a friend? What am I doing as a coworker? Am I truly taking advantage of everything God has put in my way and using it to glorify Him? When we offer this invitation, think about what God has blessed you with in this moment right here, because there's so many of us like, yeah, I can't air that dirty laundry. If there's anywhere you can air your dirty laundry, it's right here. Because there's nobody that's going to understand what you're dealing with better than the people that are sitting around you right now. And there's no group of people in this world that are going to surround you and comfort you and love you and just usher you into the way that you want to go, down the path that you want to go. And the people right here. This is a blessing that God has given us all this morning. And I'll go ahead and tell you, I should be the first one on the pew this morning. I should be the first one down there because I haven't done the job that I should do as a husband and as a dad in preparing my home because I've been too busy. So my question for you is, what can we do for you? Can I pray with you? Can we pray with you this morning? Can we help each other as individual families and an entire church of God's people? Can we help each other prepare our homes better and prepare this congregation better so that we can go and change the world? Don't leave here without making sure you're prepared. Let's stand and let's sing.